What's up, college football fans? Sonoy Valente here once again with the Mean Green Show. And today I'm joined again with Stephen Hamner and Eric Henry. And we are going to be diving into the west side of the Conference USA division and taking a deeper look at the quarterbacks. But before we get into all things, pertaining to that, you guys already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football recruiting, G5 football, the transfer portal, or any or all of the above, consider hitting that like and subscribe button because that is all that we talk about. Steve and Eric, how are you guys doing? Eric, I know you had a little bit of a trek last night from Miami to Tampa or Tampa to Miami.
No, it's actually Miami to Tampa. I was heading back home, Miami to Tampa. But yeah, made it in pretty smooth time. A record for me, 3:26. Anyone who is familiar with the landscape of from Miami to Tampa, that's usually, depending on time of day, about a 4-hour drive. So get back in 3:26 wasn't bad at all. So I'm up, fresh, got a couple cups of Cuban coffee in my system. I'm ready to go.
Of course, Cuban coffee, of course. Eric, when you go to Tampa, do you go through the Everglades or do you go through the other route, the more like centralized Florida route? When you go from Tampa to Miami?
Yeah, there's two ways you can do it, but I usually go through the Everglades. I mean, unless I'm truly not in a rush, I'll take the scenic route. Or the third route you can do, Steve, is you can go as if you were going to go down the Everglades, go down Alligator Alley, and then truly go through the Everglades. So quick 10-second sidebar here. So what he's saying is if you go from Tampa to Miami, you can go straight down and then takes you through Alligator Alley, which is just 2-lane road, and you can speed through. Or you can veer off around like Naples and truly drive through the Everglades and the Seminole reservations, which is actually a really cool, like scenic route because you get to see, you'll lose signal for about an hour. So like, don't blow a tire or need to be, accessed, but it's a really cool kind of trip through like old original Florida, so to speak. So.
And make sure you got gas when you're going down those routes too.
Eric, touching a little bit more on that Cuban coffee thing. So I saw that you posted something with Cafe Bustelo, and what was the other one?
Cafe Pilon.
Cafe Pilon. Okay, was the Bustelo K cups or something?
The Bustelo. Okay, so the Bustelo was K cups. So that was the part of the reason I was kind of saying, hey, here's the right choice because I'm not drinking K cups, right? I need my coffee.
Right.
But and this is not a paid endorsement. For those of you who may have thought that I work for FIU, this will show that I do not work for FIU because Cafe Bustelo is a sponsor of the FIU Panthers. I do not drink Cafe Bustelo. So yeah, but to each their own. Try it, and see which one you like better.
Yeah, I've had Cafe Bustelo and I like it. It's pretty big here in Tejas in this region. Yeah, so
I can see that.
Anyway, all right, guys. So kind of jumping into the West, starting with one of the maybe the favorites to win it, debatably, but UTSA, with Frank Harris and really, what do you think, Stephen? I guess we'll start with you and kind of go around the roundabout here. But what do you think the expectations for him are this year, and what role will he play, and what do you think their ultimate goal is coming off a pretty successful season and loading up through the transfer portal?
Yeah. So I think probably their ultimate goal and what's realistic is to win the West, right? To end up playing for the season championship. I think Frank Harris would be a big part of that. Now, of course, the big question what everyone talks about with Frank Harris is, can he stay healthy from injuries? And last year he was banged up, but last year, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, he had he was.
You're never wrong, Steve. Just keep on going, man.
He was, I believe he had his most healthy season to date, which, of course, led to one of UTSA's best seasons in the past few years. I think their first bowl game since 2016, maybe, something along those lines. Again, I'm never wrong, as Eric says, but maybe he'll correct me if I am. But long story short, if he stays healthy, then UTSA has a very high ceiling. I like their backup quarterback, too, Josh Atkins, the transfer from New Mexico State. He did some good things last year as well whenever Harris was hurt. And then, of course, they have Lowell Narcisse, who did some good things as well whenever Josh Adkins was hurt and they were down to a third-string quarterback. So I think quarterback room-wise, they have a pretty good depth there. They've got good experience, but I think, Frank Harris is the guy that kind of drives it. Of course, they're having their stud running back, Sincere McCormick, is only going to help that passing game develop. And again, if Frank Harris can stay healthy, he can potentially be the top quarterback in Conference USA, I think, if he stays healthy because of his ability to throw, but also his more dynamic athleticism compared to some of the other quarterbacks in Conference USA. I think gives them a potential advantage.
Yeah, I just give Steve a hard time there because he's such a polite young man there, saying in case I'm wrong, like Steve, say it with your chest, man. You know this league, so no need to couch things. You are correct. Last year was Frank Harris's most healthy year, really, since he's been a collegiate player. Now, of course, that's saying something because he did get a little banged up at times last year. So would love to see him put together an entire healthy season. Just taking it from the team perspective, you mentioned Sincere McCormick. They've got a lot of guys coming back up front. Running back Brendan Brady as a backup really could be a starter in several CUSA teams as well. So they've got depth in the backfield and defensively. When you look at Rashad Wisdom, Antonio Parks, come on, the defensive end is escaping my name right now, but they've got Lorenzo Dantzler. They've got a ton of guys there, in terms of just overall talent. Lucas Dean on the special teams. So that team really is loaded. And quite frankly, is the reason why I chose them to win Conference USA, not just the West, but the entire league.
Wow, that's what I was gonna. Yeah. Go ahead, Steven.
Also, I was gonna say, receiver wise, I know they got two dudes returning. I don't know their names, but they were a big part of the passing game last year too.
Zachary Franklin's gonna be the name to watch of a big time target there, 6'3", 6'4", about 215. So definitely some talent on the outside as well.
Yeah, and North Texas is Georgia transfer wide receiver Tommy Bush. It was between North Texas and UTSA, and it was pretty close because he's from San Antonio. And I've had him on here. We spoke about it, and obviously we don't know what Bush is going to do. But had he gone to UTSA, that would have been terrifying. As a North Texas fan, just to have that added with what they already have going. And yeah, so Eric, but speaking on that, you had them picked to win the conference outright. Man, that is interesting because I was going to ask you, what do you think they're going to finish at? Do you think the West is stronger as it sits right now than the East as a whole?
Yeah. I mean, if you're asking me personally, I think the West. But again, when you look at really the entire league, the big thing that's going to plague teams, it's the same thing that plagued teams last year. That's quarterback. A lot of teams are coming in here trying to establish who their quarterback is going to be, whether it be an open competition in a situation like an like a FIU, or you look at cases like UTEP. Where, I mean, North Texas, you could say it's a quarterback competition between Austin Nani and Jace Ruder, but in specificity with UTEP, they have a guy who's looking to, reach that upper echelon, right? So you look at the entirety of the league, it's either quarterback competitions or guys who are looking to take that next step, like at Charlotte and Chris Reynolds looking to bounce back from injury. So to bring it all the way back around to your question, I do think the West is stronger. I look at UTSA, I look at UAB, I look at Louisiana Tech. I think those three teams right there are stronger than what you would say maybe are coming out of the East, as far as the East. Top three teams in terms of maybe FAU, Marshall, and then it's a toss-up for who's third there, right?
Right. All righty. Well, moving things a little bit east down to Louisiana Tech and Ruston. They're coming off a 5-5 record. And I think, the two lead people here are Luke Anthony, who's transferring in from Abilene Christian FCS school, and then Austin Kendall, who's, coming from OU, then West Virginia, and now down to the G5 ranks. Anthony, he was a 2-year captain for ACU and threw for just a shade over 2,500 yards with 17 touchdowns and 11 interceptions in his junior season in 2019. I guess he opted out of the 2020 season because I believe he was there for spring ball for La Tech, if I'm not mistaken. But okay, so what do you guys think? I mean, Steven, obviously Austin Kendall.
He was actually at La Tech last year too, and he started.
Okay.
Yeah, he got a lot of playing time last year in 2020.
Okay. Yep. What? It's early over here. I haven't had my Bustelo yet. So anyway, being that Austin Kendall, we know what the potential there. An OU guy, and didn't Austin play a little bit at OU before he went to West Virginia? Wasn't he?
He was in competition with Kyler Murray that 2018 starting job, and so. Did not end up winning that, obviously.
And then when Jalen came in, that's when he bounced.
I think, yeah. He played at West Virginia in 2019.
Yeah.
Was the starting quarterback for the majority of the season until the past 3 or 4 games, and Jared Dagey took over. And then 2020, he was just the backup, I believe.
Gotcha. Okay, so, what are your thoughts? La Tech 5-5, that's not really – La Tech's accustomed to winning more games than that. Obviously, they got a good program there with Holtz. And do you think Luke Anthony is gonna be the guy? Being that he's had some starting, he's been in the system longer. Or do you think Austin Kendall's gonna come in fresh faced. And I mean, I don't know how much he's been, I mean, the commitment or the transfer was kind of announced pretty still yet recently, I think within like the past month. So, I mean, what I'm getting at, it's not even like he committed back in February and maybe was kind of like in the mix via Zoom. I mean, who knows? Maybe they all knew he was going there back then and we're doing some communications as far as like playbook wise. But what do you think about that? I mean, who do you think will be the starter, come the season?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one of the more interesting quarterback rooms probably in CUSA. And for the simple fact, so they also have Aaron Allen, who got some starts last year as well. And him and Luke Anthony at times, Aaron Allen was the better guy. At times, Luke Anthony was the better guy. It just kind of depended. It was kind of inconsistent, but they both showed flashes. So the thing with Aaron Allen, he's probably going to be he's a better athlete. So if they want the quarterback to do a bit more running, he might be the guy even as well. So I think there's three guys in competition. The fact that they brought in Austin Kendall, I think, is kind of stands out for two reasons. One, Luke Anthony is recovering from an injury. I can't remember the exact injury. I'll have Eric kind of remind us what it was when he starts talking. So he's recovering from an injury. And two, the fact that they brought him in means that the coaching staff isn't 100% completely sold on either Luke Anthony or Aaron Allen, which isn't a bad thing. The fact they saw Austin Kendall, they thought he could add a value to that quarterback room. So I think it's an interesting room. I think three guys could potentially win it. Of course, Kendall being the Power 5 guy, transfer in, he's going to get some hype. And I think he could be pretty successful in La Tech's offense. I wouldn't surprise me if he is the guy. But I do think there are three guys in competition. I think it's probably an underrated storyline in Conference USA right now as far as the quarterbacks go.
Steve, before I go, I just want to kick it back to you, get your thoughts on this. Just talent perspective, from what you've seen of Aaron Allen, Luke Anthony, Austin Kendall. Is Austin Kendall clearly the more talented guy? I mean, I understand he's come from the higher programs, but just in terms of pure quarterback talent.
Yeah, just talent. Just talking about throwing the football. Yeah, he's the more talented guy. And of course, things change now when you're under center and people are coming at you. But yes, just from a talent perspective, yes, I have to say that.
Okay. So, yeah, kind of pick up where you left off there. Luke Anthony did have a lot of success last year before suffering that ankle injury at Texas Christian, one that looked like it might have kept him out of spring ball and then fall ball as well. But from everything you're hearing out of Ruston, his recovery is going really well and expect him to be pretty much ready to go by the time the season starts, I mean, barring any, setbacks or unforeseen circumstances there. So when you look at the quarterback competition, I think you got to look at, from Aaron Allen's perspective, he definitely has a lot to prove. I mean, he was the primary backup, even going back to the time of Jamar Smith. And it did look as if he was kind of the heir apparent, but then Luke Anthony came over from Abilene Christian, was a very successful quarterback at Abilene Christian, comes over to La Tech, has some success, and led the team to their most success as far as wins last year. When you look at the team around him, the thing about it is they have receivers. I mean, for the past 3 or 4 years, La Tech has had a very, very deep receiver room with guys like Smoke Harris and Griffin Hebert. They may be those, smaller types, 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", but they know how to get open and be very successful in that offense. And then the thing, again, with Louisiana Tech is, so as you mentioned, they're used to having success. There's always a handful of guys from Skip Holt's team who you didn't expect coming into the year who step up, whether it's, look at guys like Justin Henderson from 2 years ago at running back. He was maybe third string on the depth chart. All of a sudden he pops up and he's a 1,000-yard rusher. There's plenty of guys like, BJ Williamson, and then you look at Tyler Grubbs and guys like that. So I definitely think Tech's going to be a factor this year, but it's really going to come down to the quarterback situation.
Interesting. Okay, going over to UAB, the defending conference champions, coming off a 6-3 season last year. Tyler Johnston. I mean, Eric, maybe you can real quick just correct me if I'm wrong here, but he struggled with injuries last year, right? Like that was kind of a thing.
Yeah, it was injuries and a little bit of inconsistency as well.
Okay, but presumably he's going to be the guy, coming into next year. I think. So I mean, you have UTSA favorite. I'm not saying I disagree with you per se, but whenever we get down to you, I'd like to, maybe you can elaborate, as far as why you're picking them over UAB. What I didn't know, I was listening to the Blazer Victory podcast or a UAB podcast yesterday. They're returning all of their offensive linemen and pretty much everybody. I mean, which is pretty crazy. And really, do you think they're? You think it's UTSA or UAB coming out of the West ultimately, and then two? I mean, do we think there's any real QB competition there? Steven, we'll start it off with you.
Yeah, I'll let Eric talk about who is the favorite there because he'll have way more insight. But as far as the competition goes, I think I don't know if I read this somewhere, but I'm pretty sure TJ3 is still the guy moving forward. And I don't know if there's really a competition as far as maybe a short leash, if you will, because like Eric talked about, there was a lot of inconsistency. But then the guy they played last year, Bryson Lucerio, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, was pretty inconsistent as well. And then the guy they played 2 years ago, who was the backup, Dustin Hopkins, was pretty inconsistent as well. So I think TJ3 gives you the best chance to win. He's got experience. He can kind of cut down the inconsistencies and take what the defense gives him. Something me and Eric have talked about a lot is kind of throwing the ball downfield, and maybe the offense doesn't necessarily call for that. And so I think taking what the defense gives you, taking those short kind of intermediate throws and letting the deep throw kind of develop over time. Plus, I don't know who the running back is, but they always have a good running game, and Eric will be able to expand on that. So if you can rely on that, take what the defense gives you, limit any turnovers and kind of force throws, and I think whoever's at quarterback for UAB should be pretty good. And if TJ3 can play like he did at the end of his freshman season, those last 5 games when they played A&M close, he had a good bowl game, and they beat Middle Tennessee State whenever he took the starting job from AJ Ederly. Eric, again, correct me. But if he can get back to that type of play where he was using his legs, taking care of the football, push the ball downfield accurately, then I think UAB could be really, really good. So, again, consistency will be the biggest thing as far as the quarterback position goes.
So now I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of insight of Steve and I's conversation we've had around UAB, really gotten to the meat of this over the offseason on the QB Spotlight podcast. And Steve, I'm going to start here with a question. What is a good yards per attempt for a quarterback? Just a, basic offense, what you're kind of looking for?
Good yards per attempt. You at least want that. Today's game, that 7.5-ish would be like, okay, that's good. You need that. Once you start getting 8 or 9, that's like pushing the ball downfield. But you want your guy to be 7.5-ish for most offenses.
15 seconds or less. Can you explain why that is?
For the simple fact that you want to have some type of vertical threat, push the ball downfield. Because if there's no threat, push the ball downfield, then the defense will, of course, not respect downfield, and then they'll be able to crowd the line of scrimmage, and they'll give you those 3-4 yard passes all day.
When you look at Tyler Johnson's career, he's thrown 35 touchdowns, 25 interceptions, completion percentage just a tick above 53%. That's the inconsistency we're talking about. Now, with that being said, part of the reason that you can't necessarily blame that on him, offensive coordinator Brian Vincent, the offense is one that, for all the success they have rushing the football, they like to push it downfield. Steve, if you were to give a guess as to what TJ3's career average is, yards per attempt, what'd you say?
Off the top of my head.
This is clear off the top of your head. Just give me a guess.
Yeah, is it 8?
He has a career yards per attempt average of 9.2.
Wow.
So that goes to show you that they are pushing the ball downfield. Now, rightfully so. They've had good deep threats. They've had guys like Myron Mitchell and others. They've had guys who can stretch the field, right? But with that being said, it's very much boom or bust. It's Spencer Brown, get us 4 or 5 yards, and then we're taking a shot downfield. That's why his TD to INT ratio is almost 1-to-1, 35 TDs, 25 interceptions. To bring it all the way back around to a team perspective, and you mentioned the running game, Steve, they have Dwayne McBride. Not only did they have Spencer Brown last year, they had Dwayne McBride, who averaged 10 yards per attempt, 48 carries for about 417 yards and 5 touchdowns. We're not expecting him to carry those numbers over a full, 10, 11, 12, 13 game year. But if he can at least keep the 5-6 yards per attempt and get them in good, manageable situations, Steve, just again, thinking from an offensive perspective here, isn't it kind of hard to imagine, hard to fathom that they had 2 good running backs, which means in theory, every time they were running the ball, they're getting 4, 5, 6 yards a chunk. And yet still their completion percentage is something around 52, 53%. Yeah. You would think that the play calling, and this isn't a, Brian Vincent, bass session here. Yeah. It's just you use common sense here and you think, if you're in 2nd and short and 3rd and short, that the play calling would reflect one that would be a higher completion percentage. Steve, is that not fair?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, you want that completion percentage at least that 60 range, like at least in that offense.
Okay, so to bring it all the way back around here, from a broader team perspective, they have all the talent. TJ3 should be the guy. Bryson Lucero, Dylan Hopkins, they should serve as backups. Defensively, they return a lot of guys. TD Marshall, Chris Mole. I mean, the list goes on of really stud players on defense. There's no reason to think that they won't compete with UTSA. The reason I'm picking UTSA is I think they have a higher ceiling based on the quarterback situation. For 3 straight years, Tyler Johnson, for all the reasons that we just laid out there, I don't know who the blame falls with more, whether it's TJ3 and what they're asking to execute or the offensive play calling. But you got to think at some point in time, you can't just rely on that formula of heavy running game, boom or bust passing game, and defense keep us in games.
Yep. I'm with you.
All righty. Well, moving things over to not only the dark horse of the conference, but I believe the entire nation in North Texas. And Stephen Hamner's got to run off to an autograph signing here shortly, so he may just leave it with Eric and I. So I'm glad he stuck around at least for this one. No. So this one, in Austin Aune or University of North Carolina transfer Jace Ruder, who wins the job, who has a higher ceiling, higher floor, etc. Stephen, I don't know how plugged in you are to that region, of the country in North Carolina, but obviously we know what Austin Aune can kind of do. Seeing at least him, halfway through the season last year, or half of the season last year, they were kind of, going back and forth with him and Bean. And at the very least, I think Aune is a decent QB in the conference. Debatably maybe a good QB. I mean, I know all these PFFs, have him as the best in the world or whatever, but can't really put too much stock into that. But again, I mean, I don't think he's anything to scoff at per se. I just don't know if he can, be an it factor, if you will, at that position. And then Jace Ruder coming in. This is where I was just seeing if you happen to have any more insight on this, Stephen. But I've heard, through some of the forums that it was a pretty tightly contested battle between him and Sam Howell there for a while. Mm-hmm. And, obviously coming out of Kansas, kind of a little bit hard to evaluate because of the competition that, you play isn't really up to snuff with other regions, of the country. But he was pretty lights out, so, what are you thinking of this quarterback competition? Do you think there's much? Think it's a little bit overhyped? Do you think maybe Jace Ruder is just an insurance policy, or, what are your thoughts on this going forward? And, can you see North Texas, maybe popping off a little bit this year, making a bowl game?
Well, yeah, to talk about Ruder first, there's literally no film besides his high school film. The fact that he lost to Sam Howell isn't held against him. Sam Howell could be the first quarterback taken this year, and so you just don't have a lot of film. He's a good athlete. From the film you have of his high school tape, at least he's able to run the ball. But I think Austin Aune is a pretty good quarterback in itself, and I think he probably got a little too much criticism at times last year, just because the COVID year, his first year starting, and he did show some good things last year. So I do think there's potential with both those guys. I think there's probably is a actual competition going on. I think Aune is probably the guy to take the first snaps and get the start. But I don't know if the leash is necessarily long, right? Like if he struggles or is inconsistent in the first game, 2 or 3, you can see Ruder getting in. Plus, Ruder just showed up in the summer. I don't think he was there for the spring. And correct me if I'm wrong. And so I think playing a little bit of I don't know if catch up's the right word, but getting involved in the system a bit more and kind of learning terminology, just because it's probably a bit different than North Carolina had. So I think that's kind of the best case scenario is Aune starts. Aune plays well, and they don't need Ruder, or Aune has the first few games, he's inconsistent, and then they give Ruder a shot and kind of see what happens from there. But I don't know really what to expect from Ruder. I like what I saw from Aune last year. I think he can build on that, develop, but he does have to take a next step to probably keep that job.
Okay, let's play a quick hypothetical game, Stephen. Let's say you were a betting man, which I know you're not, but let's say you were. And let's say you were betting with UAB to beat North Texas. Who would you be more concerned to see running out as the starter? Austin Aune or Jace Ruder?
More concerned running out of the starter. That's a good question. Maybe Ruder, for the simple fact I've got film on Austin Aune. I kind of maybe potentially know how to defend that, and the fact that when Ruder's in at quarterback, are they calling the same scheme? Like calling things a little bit differently? What's that going to be? That doesn't mean that Ruder's better than Aune, but I'm just thinking from a UAB standpoint. If I have film on someone, I have a good defense, then I probably have a better situation to defend them. So top of my head, I would say Ruder as far as who I'm scared of the most if I'm UAB. But that's just because I have film on Aune and not on Ruder.
Well, fear not, for I'm with you. All right, Eric, what do you think?
In the interest of time, I'm going to go and make this quick here. A couple quick hitters as far as what's going to determine North Texas's success next year. One, they have to stop anybody. Keep points off of the scoreboard. Yes, I see you guys are in agreement there. Third defensive coordinator is many years. what do we had? Phil Bennett, right? I always go with like a Phil Bowen because I know it was Clint Bowen, Phil Bennett, and I forget who it was in 2018. I'm having a memory lapse.
They all blend together.
They all blend together, right? But he's turned to Phil Bennett to take over. What's so weird about that defense is it's not like they haven't had talent. I mean, they have a guy in Dion Noville who's widely regarded as one of the top defensive players in all of CUSA, even though he plays a position that I guess in today's football, maybe you don't put a premium on, right? But he's that big defensive tackle, kind of a nose tackle there. But this guy can get after the passer. I mean, you had a game last year, so you can refresh my memory. What game last year did he have 4.5 tackles for loss? Was it UTEP?
I think it was Southern Miss.
Maybe it was Southern Miss. I know there was a game where he just broke out and had 4.5 tackles for loss, a sack. But listen, he's a great defensive player, but he's going to need the talent around him. A guy, KD Davis, who I've heard a lot about, local kid, right, from Denton. Remember, serves me correct? Yeah, I know he can play pretty well. So they haven't had the talent. Just got to get out there and make it happen. That's number one. Number two, the rushing attack. We know that DeAndre Torrey has taken his talents to Southern Miss, right? Trey Siggers. Trey Siggers.
Yes.
Trey. Did I say Southern Miss or Southern Methodist?
I think you said Southern Miss, but SMU.
Okay, let's try this again. I'll do this. Okay, we'll just rewind here. There were 3 running backs who rushed over 500 yards last year: DeAndre Torrey, Trey Siggers, and Oscar Attaway III. Trey Siggers took his talents to Southern Methodist. There we go, leaving DeAndre Torrey, who had a really good year in 2019. That's what really kind of surprised. Was it 18 or 19? Remind me again.
I think 18 is when he kind of has
18. Yeah, because the years are blended together with COVID. Essentially, DeAndre Torrey, his first year in North Texas, had 15 TDs, almost 1,000 yards, excelled in the kick return game as well. If you compare him with Oscar Attaway, that gives them a nice balance in the rushing attack, and we know that North Texas is going to be able to pass the ball well. So those are really my keys for North Texas as far as success. I have them finishing 8th. That's where I picked them in the media poll. But I do have them 4th in the West. So I do think, depending on how many teams CUSA is into a bowl game, they could get 6 or 7. It's just really going to depend on the quarterback situation and what happens defensively.
All righty. All right. Moving things over to Rice. And, is this already Luke McCaffrey's team? Or is there any, concerns, if so, that he hasn't been there for spring, to help prep and just kind of like, I know with all these other ones like Kendall and Reuter and all that, that are kind of in the same situation coming in, but it's not like clear cut, they're going to be the guy. But maybe it's just the hype, around the McCaffrey name. But how much of a QB competition is there currently? And do you guys have any idea what happened with Mike Collins, their QB from 2020? I checked online before we hopped on, and I didn't see him on their depth chart or anything. But any idea from either one of you of what happened to Mike Collins, if anything happened at all? A, and then B, do you guys think Luke McCaffrey is going to be the guy, and how do you think that will shake out, being that it's, just hitting the ground running there, without any spring ball?
Eric, we had Taylor McHarg on the QB Spotlight. What did he say about Matt Collins?
I was going to say, so we did have Taylor McHarg on the QB Spotlight podcast, and also we're talking with him. So. Also, we were talking with him and people around the Roost, Matt Bartlett and others there. Essentially, just chose to walk away from football. It was something that was injury related, and you don't want to speculate, but they're, for one reason or another, chose to walk away from football, which is really surprising. I know it caught me by surprise because he looked to finally be the steady answer there at Rice at quarterback. 10 touchdowns, 1 interception, really gave them the QB, and I'll let Steve opine on this more, but really gave them the QB play that they needed to match what their defense was doing. But yeah, he just chose to walk away from football.
Yep. No, you're right. Yeah, and like you said, they had a threat of the throwing game, which is all Rice needed, right? And so there's a threat. As far as if it was Luke McCaffrey's team, no idea. I would go ahead and assume at some point it will be, though. Even though the offense is a little different than like his skill set, right? He's a good athlete. He still is an unproven passer, and with Rice's offense, being a lot of like heavy 12 personnel, under center, 22 personnel, whatever it may be. Sometimes you hand the ball off, you roll out, and you throw it if you're the Rice quarterback. I think they're probably evolving a bit. I think that's what we heard when we had Taylor on the QB Spotlight podcast a few weeks ago. But I would assume at some point it will be his team, just because he's a good athlete, and I think he will be one of the better athletes in all Conference USA once given the chance.
Interesting. All right, down to Southern Miss. Trey Lowe. He's West Virginia transfer. He was there, took over after Jack Abraham left, and showed some good flashes and everything. And What are your thoughts with him going into having a full off season and an offensively minded new head coach in Will Hall? And I listen to a lot of the Southern Miss fans, and they're pretty hyped up. I mean, some of them think they're going to win 8 games. Not saying they will, they won't, but they're pretty hyped up. They're pretty sold on the Trey Lowe show, and from the things I've been hearing and seeing myself, he's looking more and more polished, which is concerning because in the back end of North Texas season, that was kind of slated as more of a winnable game, and now I'm not really feeling so confident about that. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts with Trey Lowe and really the outlook for Southern Miss this year?
Yeah, well, I am all in on Trey Lowe just right off the bat. I think he could potentially be the best quarterback in Conference USA. I know it's kind of high praise right off the bat, but there's no other quarterback that you're just like, man, he's the dude, right? So I think he could have a big surprise season. Me and Eric have talked about Trey Lowe several times on the QB Spotlight podcast, and then like you said, Sonoy, I know a lot of Southern Miss fans are extremely excited for Trey Lowe, but I think he fits Will Hall's offense to a T, right? He's able to run, he's able to push the ball downfield when called upon, and he has a lot of kind of unique skill sets that will make him successful in that Will Hall offensive scheme. And we saw a little bit last year in his game against FAU. That was his time to shine and kind of just jump on the scene, if you will. And he finally had like reps and was able to be the starting guy. And another point that I think is important for me is this was his first off season where he was actually able to do football year round, because he played baseball, was a good baseball player. So, high school, West Virginia, during spring ball, he was playing baseball. Last year, they didn't have it because of COVID. And so this is his first year to have an actual spring ball, an actual just football off season. And so I think those reps will be valuable, but I think he fits Will Hall's offense to a T. And I don't know how good Southern Miss is going to be, but I know if they're not good, it won't be because of Trey Lowe. I think he's going to have a really good season and just going to surprise a lot of people.
I'll piggyback off Steve and make it real quick here. Frank Gore Jr., obviously a stud, taking after his father, just picking up right where he left off. And, I think he's going to take that next step. And he's definitely going to be a 1,000-yard rusher next year. Jason Brownlee, definitely a pleasant surprise. JUCO All-American, comes into Southern Miss, averaged about 20 yards per catch. He can play. Arvin Fletcher on the offensive line has been one of the most versatile offensive linemen in CUSA across his time in the league. He can play tackle, guard, inside at center. Defensively, they're getting some guys back who opted out last year due to COVID. Not that they had COVID, but due to COVID concerns, I should say. So keep an eye on those guys as well. And Southern Miss, I am high on them. I think they're one of those teams, Sonoy and Steve, who can be anywhere between, if things pop well, 6, 7 wins, maybe 8. Because they lost 3 games last year by less than 7 points. It wasn't like they were getting blown out last year, and that was with all the turmoil going on with the team. So things pop well, maybe 7, 8. If things not so much, maybe 3, 4 wins.
Eric, where did you have them finish in the media poll? Do you remember?
Let me flip over really quick. I just had to pull up. I think I got them 10th. Remember, just because while I think, I've got them 10th. While I think Trey Lowe is going to be really good. But the big thing that I need to see more of is that defense. First-year head coaches, that's usually an adjustment, right? I mean, to being literally a head coach, that does take time to adjust. Secondly, the defense. While they held tough last year, I do want to see how they'll hold up, over a full year, and not given some of the circumstances of like who they play. I think their schedule is a little bit tougher this year as well.
Yeah, and feel free to chime in on this or not. We can just pass by. But my biggest knock with Frank Gore is he doesn't wear gloves. There's nothing on his arms from the sleeve down to his fingertips. I don't know what he's doing. Like, he's obviously talented, but this is,
I'm going to chime in here. Who else doesn't wear gloves?
Who else doesn't wear? I don't know. The quarterback.
No, his dad. He's
yeah, that's true.
That was as a resident Floridian. That was one of the things. Frank Gore for years, even go back to his Miami days. You back when you had the McGahees and Portises and Edgerrin James, and they had gloves and wristbands and whatnot. He was like the throwback.
Yeah.
So I think that is why he does that.
That's a bad dude to be able to do that. I like that.
Yeah, that's true. But maybe if he wore some gloves that take him to the next level. I don't know though. But all right. So just last one here. UTEP. Gavin Hardison. He started all 7 games that the Mines had last year. It was 108 of 199, a little over 1,400 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Any competition there? And UTEP always plays UNT closely. I'm not trying to dismiss them by any means. I mean, they could even shock us this year. But I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on the QB room and just the outlook for UTEP this season? I mean, it's got to be hard being a UTEP fan. I mean that sincerely. I really do. It's just kind of, I just feel like they're always, I don't know, it's just, but anyway, Steven, you take it away from there.
So before I talk about the quarterbacks, I know Eric has some good stuff to say about UTEP. And so Eric called Charlotte's 2019 season. That was kind of Eric's team, right? So anytime Eric talks about CUSA, who he has a hunch on, that I think it's important to listen just because he's so dialed in and he's usually right about CUSA stuff. Maybe not about music choice, but that's a different story. But before the Charlotte season, he said Charlotte's going to win 7+ games, go to bowl game. They did. I didn't think that was going to happen. Last year, Rice was kind of his team. And even though Rice only played 5 games, went 2-3, they still showed a lot of fight, and they ended up beating Marshall. And so I think they had a pretty successful year for what it was, kind of his hunch team. And now I won't kind of ruin it, but this is kind of his hunch team as well. So before he goes into more detail about UTEP, Gavin Harrison is someone that I thought showed some pretty good things last year. He's got a strong arm. He can push it downfield. I think it's kind of similar to the UAB quarterback situation. You've got a good run game. Let's not try to chunk the ball downfield left and right. Let's hit some short to intermediate throws. I think if he can improve his accuracy, then, excuse me, I think as a team, they're going to find more success and kind of can put longer drives and sustain it together as opposed to relying on a big run or hitting a big throw. So I think consistency in the short to intermediate passing game is where Gavin Harrison, need some water, where he needs to take his next step. And I think if he does that, UTEP could potentially surprise some people. So I'll hand it off to Eric now because he's got some good stuff on UTEP.
UTEP in 90 seconds or less. First off, I will piggyback off Steve's point in terms of, my sleeper team. I don't necessarily want to say that I'm expecting big things out of UTEP. I'm expecting big things in relation to their lack of success over the past 4 years, really since the end of the Sean Kugler era there at UTEP. So that was really the big thing. Anything over 4 wins is a success for this team. Is that a success for Dana Dimmel enough to get him a contract extension? Who knows? The AD there at UTEP came out and said that we're not there yet in terms of giving him a contract extension, despite the fact that the 3 wins eclipsed the amount of wins they had in the previous 3 seasons combined. On the field, here's the thing. Steve talked about Gavin Hardison. I will talk about the rest of the team. Deion Hankins, the hometown hero, the all-time leading rusher in the history of El Paso high school football there. He had a really good redshirt freshman year there, rushing for over 600 yards. He's back. They're going to get Quadrace Wadley back as well, who's a super senior, believe in his 6th year. At the receivers, Jacob Cowing, Justin Garrett, 2 really big, talented, deep threats. As Steve mentioned, in terms of, maybe not taking as many chances down the field. Offensively, they ran a lot of 2-man routes. And yes, when you have 2 good receivers, you can do that. But it led to some plays where if those guys were covered, Gavin Harrison's just back there wondering, what do I do with the football? So definitely want to see the offense evolve under new offensive coordinator Mark Warner. Also welcoming a new defensive coordinator in Bradley Dale Pevito, who takes over. On defense, praise Ahamahule. That is one of the names you'll want to remember if you're a CUSA fan. Definitely a top-end CUSA potential NFL draft pick next year. Big thing, UTEP was running a lot of 3-3-5. Definitely ran a lot of 5 and 6 defensive backs over the past few years. Definitely want to see what they're going to be able to do as far as they shift down in defensive backs a little bit, maybe put a few more linebackers on the field. How will that fare defensively? But it's all going to come down to quarterback. I mean, and just really kind of showing how far that team has come offensively. When you go back to the Kyle Loxley era, they were consistently one of the worst performing teams in terms of pass offense in really the entire nation. So the fact that they got any output from the passing game was a success, but they need to take the next step in order to have really more success in the win column. I think, again, if you're putting them on the spot right now, I think it's reasonable goal for UTEP would be 5 wins. I can't say 6 just yet, because when you look at their wins last year, they didn't beat anybody in conference, pushed some teams pretty hard, but didn't beat anybody in conference, and their one FBS win was Louisiana Monroe, not necessarily the top end of FBS football. So want to see how that fares as well, but keep an eye on UTEP.
Fair.
Interesting stuff. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up the west side of this division, or the west side of this conference. And guys, where can they find you?
Steve, take it away.
Yeah, they can find us at on Twitter at QB Spotlight, podcast QB Spotlight, and then YouTube QB Spotlight. So just QB Spotlight all around.
You can find me on Twitter at @EricCHenry_. Of course, you can find my work on Twitter. Oh, okay, on Twitter at @EricCHenry_. Wow, I'm the one flubbing the line today. Usually that's Steve, but he's right. @EricCHenry_ on Twitter. Find my work at Underdog Dynasty on Twitter, underdogdynasty.com. SB Nation's home for Group of 5 football coverage. And last but not least, Conference USA Podcast, SB Nation, and Shulable Pod on Twitter for FAU, FIU.
And I will link both of their Twitter handles in the description below. I don't know if you guys caught that, but I did that with the last video. I'm turning into a real Steve Jobs over here. This is the first time I've linked anything in the description. So I'm on the rise. And but guys, once again, thank you so much for coming on. Look forward to doing it again soon. We're almost there. Football season is almost here. I really cannot wait to sit around and do nothing on Saturdays and just text with you guys and hear what's going on and who's up and who's down financially, Steven. But all right, guys, once again, thanks again, and we will talk soon.